Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. We're in it again. It's May. Some of you have attended graduations. Congratulations to your scholars. You may be the scholar. Congratulations to you. Memorial Day is coming up next Monday, so I know people are very excited about taking an opportunity to maybe have a vacation, go on some trips. You all may be celebrating in a variety of ways, going on cruises, all of the good stuff. And I think it is absolutely amazing that you're taking time during your spring, summer to be able to take good care of you because it is Mental Health Awareness Month and we are focusing on wellness this month. Yes, my allergies still have me in a chokehold. So today you get some nasally southern accent. And yes, you're welcome. We have been talking a lot about wellness and setting boundaries, confronting the worst parts of ourselves, and being liberated seems to be the theme for the weeks. I'm sure you all have gotten tickled for seeing a few different memes come out as people have responded to when they have felt as if they were being insulted or their space violated. But also, I think we've had a good opportunity to see what happens when we make judgments about people when we don't have all the information, and then we come back later and get some information about some things that happen, and it makes us really reflect on the judgments that we make about people. So, as we have been talking about our sleeping habits last week, and in the first week of this series, we discussed sleeping habits was actually week one, week two was financial habits. This week, I think we're right on task, right on course, if you will, to discuss our occupational habits. As I talked about that, a lot of people are vacationing, celebrating Mother's Day, Father's Day, graduations, Memorial Day, all the good stuff. It makes us, I think, a lot of times really reflect, and this is kind of that combination of the financial wellness and the occupational wellness. I think it really makes us reflect on why sometimes we're not in a position to be able to do and enjoy some of the things we want to enjoy because maybe we're not in a position financially to be able to afford it. Maybe we're not in a career path that allows us to be able to take off days to enjoy things such as vacations. Maybe we're under a lot of stress. We don't feel like we're able to really leave work because there's so many things that we have to yet accomplish. Some of us may be dealing with some health issues, and so I'm already taking off days to manage my health things. I don't want to be adding on to that by taking off days to maybe take some time off, particularly if these aren't going to be days that are paid off. And some people are like, hey, I'm trying to make ends meet. And so vacationing just doesn't really seem very practical. I'm trying to find a couple of other jobs to be able to even just keep up with the basics like groceries and being able to pay for where we live and childcare. So I want to talk a little bit about occupational wellness, right? So that is our topic for today. When I was growing up, I heard this quite a bit, and I think things have changed since then. But when you're younger, you have a job. When you get older, you have a career. So at this ripe age of 48, I think I've gotten a chance to see kind of several different generations at this point in their occupational dynamics. I've seen people have one job their entire life and they retire from it and they have benefits, a pension that comes from that, where they worked for a railroad or some factory work or in education or for the military, right? Then I've known people who were formerly incarcerated or people who had not worked outside of the home a lot, being able to have difficulty being able to even get into any kind of options, such as a career. And so they're in positions to take whatever jobs they can find. Um, when you're in that situation, you're much more likely to have less pay and definitely more likely to not be treated adequately because people feel like they have you in a position of you need that job, right? And so when we know that when we need a job and people understand that we need a job, they will sometimes use that as a bargaining tool to mistreat us, whether that is financially or by the way they engage us. I have seen people be terminated from jobs because of their caregiving responsibilities. Perhaps they are a single parent and they have a child who has just kind of struggled with illness. We're in that season. A lot of people have gotten this head cold that I have right now. A lot of people are in this season of their children dealing with different illnesses. Maybe they have a child that has a long term chronic illness that requires much more care, ongoing care. Maybe they are a child that has diabetes. Maybe they're a child with sickle cell. Maybe they're a child that has childhood cancer. Maybe you're caregiving for family members, parents, aging parents. You may have aunts, uncles. There may be people you've adopted into your family that you're taking care of that have a lot of transitional needs. Maybe they were in a situation where they lost their parents, and so now you're having to try to take time off work to get records and get them registered and get them signed up for insurance and fill out legal documents, which requires you to be able to be away from work. And so sometimes people are in positions where their jobs are not very supportive of them being off work regardless of the reason why. And particularly as we've seen, I think, a shortage of just staffing altogether at work. And so people, I think, are just really in general cared about covering those shifts and making sure people are available, and maybe less accommodating to us having those needs of being able to get off work and having that flexibility in schedules, like, oh, I'll come in a little later, I'll come in a little earlier, I'll work on the weekends, make the time up. Sometimes people just are not in a position where they're maybe able to or willing to be accommodating because they're dealing with the stress of having to fill this role right now on the job. And so if you can't fill it, I need to get somebody else in here that can. And that's caused, I think, a lot of conflict for people on jobs. I have seen people who were on parole or probation or victims of crimes be terminated because of release conditions, and like, oh, I have to go and I have to do this urine test, or I have to go and show up and check in. I have to go to court, right? And so again, people not willing for you to have once a month where you have to take care of things seems like it's interfering to them with your ability to be able to work in the way that they need you to. I've seen people get downsized in their jobs because places close, and now you're in a position of looking for work, and you may be at an older age, and we know that there's definitely ageism. And so it may be difficult to be able to find another job, particularly if you've had a specialized kind of work training. Maybe you were trained to work on a specific machine in a factory, or maybe you have only worked with your hands and you're not seeing jobs that are willing to hire you because now they see you as a risk factor because you're older and you've got some health issues. And so you're having a hard time being able to find another job. And then I've also seen people have to kind of transfer jobs or move mid career. We saw a lot of, it looked like hiring during the pandemic, like people were jobs were available, and then all of a sudden we come out of this pandemic and people realize like they've lost money. People just don't have the resources to be able to spend in the same way. So now the bottom line is looking a little different. We've gotten in the red, and so then we see these massive layoffs. You've seen companies that have been around your whole life now closing. You've seen companies file for bankruptcy. And so, what happens to the people that work there? And oftentimes, people aren't getting a lot of notice about that they are going to be downsized or that a job is closing. And so, people are scrambling and trying to figure things out. And often, when you're looking to cut at a company, you're going to cut the people that make the most, right? That's going to save you a lot of money. And so you saw a lot of mid-level managers and upper level management being cut, and people are more willing to spend less money on somebody that's new and learning because, hey, we can just train you. And we've also seen that people were given more job responsibilities even if they weren't given more pay, like where you're just going to absorb the responsibilities of the people that we laid off. And so now you're working more for the same amount of pay. And some people are in experience of forced overtime for these reasons, right? Which leads to more burnout and stress related to work. I've definitely seen people be able to move up in their careers. They got more education, they got more training, or got back into the career force um, after various things happened in their lives. And so they've been able to move up and make additional money. But I've also seen people struggle to move up in their careers, even with additional training. Nobody wanting to take that chance on you. You'll see now a lot of times people will say they want you to have 2 to 3 years experience in an area, or 3 to 5 years of experience in an area. And you think, well, how will I get that experience if nobody ever takes a chance on me? I think I grew up in an era where people would take a chance on you and they would train you, which is why people had such longevity with companies. Now companies are less willing to do that because, again, the market is a wee bit more saturated with people. So I have options for people who are already trained and experts in this area. So I'm less likely to spend that money trying to train someone when I'm looking for a certain level of expertise. And then there's all these new systems out here, being able to be literate in a lot of these programming, software programming, or certain training models. And so people are finding that even though they've been in this field, this is their career path, they've been to school in it, they're not trained in certain things, and that's now hindering them from being able to progress. And there are other people who are able to get that experience and get that training, and yeah, here they can move up, and they may be younger, which is then causing some dynamics at work where now my supervisors are getting younger, but you're relying on the people who have been there to give you their wisdom and expertise. So that's causing some conflict and chaos. I have seen people start businesses successfully that do really well. They, even through the ups and downs, the ebbs and the flow, they're able to get to a place of profit with their business. But I've also seen other people that have tried and not been able to be successful in a business, or it never really gotten to a point where it made them significant money. And so they either broke even or they lost money and didn't want to try again, right? Because when we feel like that's a failure, like I'm over here and this is my dream and I've created this business and it's not really flourishing. I remember being in I want to say it was a workshop, I can't remember, but I'll say that it was a workshop, and this guy was quite frustrated. He said, all of these things that you say to people who, for various reasons, have difficulty being able to get jobs and move up and get promoted, and they start their own business. But he said, you have to support those businesses, and that's where my frustration is. And he was somebody who had been incarcerated previously. He launched his business, was an expert in his business, did great work, but people would often go to other folks because sometimes we just don't like to support certain people. Sometimes we don't like to support certain ethnic groups. Sometimes we don't like to support certain genders. Like there's a lot of bias out here in terms of what businesses we patronize. And we also recognize that there are certain gimmicks and things that sell, that trend, that will get you to try a business, a place, even if it's not as good as this other place. But because it has a reputation, or it's got great marketing, or they've got really attractive people that are selling you this product, right? So I'm much more likely to buy this versus investing in this other product, even though it's a better product and this person is more well trained. And so, like, that was his frustration. And whoever was facilitating the workshop was like, you just need to go back and revamp your plan and your strategy, which felt really dismissive to this guy. And I can understand because he's like, I am revamping. Like, there is also bias that exists, and you're not really addressing that bias that's occurring because people are specifically blackballing me because they don't want me to be able to be in this successful business, but because I'm competition to people who are not really doing good quality work, right? So you tear me down and disparage me, and I don't get a chance to allow people to see people don't get to see what kind of work I do, then they won't come and utilize me. So these are real things, right? And we talked a little bit about the effects of racial discrimination and inequities that exist, bias that exists when we're talking about some of the barriers to financial wellness last week. I have seen younger people have several jobs in a very short period of time compared to what I'm essentially used to staying in a job for a few years and developing and growing before moving on. And we also saw the great resignation that happened following the pandemic, where people not only were leaving their jobs to get unemployment, but also, or because they got downsized, they were able to get unemployment and actually make more than they made when they were employed. And then being able to figure out, like, hey, I'm a bit of a hot commodity. People are looking for me, and I can kind of navigate this where I'm getting paid maximum benefits, I'm getting relocation, all these kind of things, and I just kind of keep switching jobs, continuing to have more and more negotiation power with each opportunity. So let's talk about barriers to occupational wellness, and then we'll talk about what occupational wellness would look like. So these are barriers to why we are not satisfied with our jobs, or not in places of satisfaction on a career path, or not even being able to identify a career path. I do not take for granted that most of us at some point in our lives are trying to figure out what exactly would be the best fit for us in a career path, in a job. Looking at my level of skills, looking at my interests, my work ethic, like all of these things kind of go into how we find career paths. Who you know, like that's definitely a real part of this process, because it speaks to you being able to access certain career paths and opportunities. Sometimes we don't even know what jobs are out there, what fields are out there for us, because we haven't been exposed to them. And so I think even at before we even get into what the barriers are, we do have to talk about access being the initial barrier, because how am I supposed to grow in fields in which I don't even know? So then as we get to kind of if I didn't have career counseling in school, if I wasn't connected with a mentor, if I wasn't a part of organizations that taught me about different career paths, if I didn't get a chance to do volunteering, I didn't have opportunities to be able to have that mentorship or have those summer programs and get access to different fields, maybe because of people that were in the church with me or because of who was in my neighborhood or whatever the case may be, then I'm already starting out limited. And then there's the education piece, right? So literacy is really an issue in our country, and I think a lot of times it's uncomfortable issue, so we don't like to talk about it because, of course, it speaks to what? It speaks to poverty and some other dynamics about how our schools are structured, and who has access to information, and also being able to address learning disabilities and other needs in young people, who has access to being diagnosed, who has access to being tested, who has access to receiving support services, right? And we know that we have cut funding for a lot of programs that were addressing some of these things. And so if I'm in a household with people that don't read and I struggle with reading, what's the likelihood that I'm going to be literate by the time I finish high school, if in fact I do graduate, right? So these are some of the challenges with going into the workforce. It used to be that you didn't have to have a high school diploma in order to get into the workforce. Now it is, not only do you need a high school diploma, but now they're looking at, okay, do you have some other level of education even outside of that to even be able to get into the gate of jobs that would pay you enough to be able to live, right? Because again, and that's that job career piece for me. Like a job may not necessarily pay you enough to have a livable wage, because you definitely could be making 10, 11, $12 an hour. That's not enough to sustain your ability to even be able to afford to live, right? And so, and for those young people who are in households where they're trying to help parents be able to keep the lights on and make sure we have enough to eat, and make sure we have a place to stay, like they are dropping out of school to be able to work, right? And so you're getting into, more often than not, jobs that are going to be in the food industry, jobs that are going to be you working in capacities where you're making less and you're usually not getting any benefits as a result of that. And I'm not by any means dismissing or downplaying anyone's job, because everyone has a purpose, and everyone has a gift, and everyone has a capacity to be able to provide in the ways that they can. However, it often is in a place where we're limited out the gate into what our opportunities are based on what that access piece. All right. So, also, I think it's important for us to talk about burnout. We know that high levels of stress, I've talked to you all about stress previously and how that affects us, how it affects our sleep, how it affects our ability to heal our bodies, how it affects our mental wellness, our cognitive clarity, all of the things, right? And prolonged stress and the effects of that on our body, right? So, fatigue. But we're getting burned out because, again, I'm not necessarily in a position where I get off days, I get sick days, I get vacation days, personal care days, and so I'm just working nonstop. And some people, again, because they're either working multiple shifts to make extra money or they're working extra jobs to make extra money, are not having that time off, right? So it used to be that you worked a certain amount of days and then you got time off, but that started getting real blurry for a lot of people during COVID, particularly when folks started working remotely. But it also got blurry when you need to have this money in order for you to be able to make ends meet. And it also definitely depends on the job and whether or not we have enough people working, right? So that's another issue, is our resources. And our resources could be our staffing. Do we have enough people to work? But it also could be where you work, the building that you work, or if it's not in a building, you might be in a mine, you might be working outside, but like what are the conditions like in which you're working? Well, recognizing that a lot of people are getting ill, are still getting ill because of the conditions in which they're working. There could be dust, there could be mold, any number of things that are there. Maybe there's not reasonable accommodations. So I may actually need to be able to park closer to the building and take an elevator, but we don't have that. And so I'm already at a deficit going into the building because I've had to exert so much energy and cause my body so much pain to even be able to get in here. And maybe the things that would make it a lot easier for me to work aren't available. I had a client who we literally were going back and forth with her job over a chair. I mean, a chair. She just needed to be able to sit to take some of that pressure off that lower back. A lot of us are there. That lower back, those knees, right, the hips. And so being able to sit, I'm able to do the work, I'm able to be productive. I just need a chair. And they would just, fight her over being able to have this accommodation of the chair. But also, we're in positions where you may have poorly trained supervisors. You may be more trained than your supervisor is. They're not able to enforce anything, a company policy. Some of y'all are in places that don't have company policies. People are in spaces where got a lot of folks that have negative thinking patterns. We used to call them strawberries at one of my jobs, like because if you have a bruised strawberry or it's starting to rot, like it's going to affect all those other strawberries in there too. And so it can look pretty at the top, but then you start getting into it, you realize like, oh, these things are decaying, right? And so there's oftentimes a person in the job or people who are that negative, critical person, and like they just everything they touch turns to decay because it just changes everybody's mood. And you know that morale is very important. The climate of job is very important to how well your mental health is when you're on that job. And so for a lot of places, like people just dread going because like, oh, gotta show up and work with this person, or the environment is just so toxic that it makes it very difficult for people to be successful and productive. But also just difficulty receiving constructive feedback. And you'll hear me talk about this one a lot because oftentimes people don't hear feedback, they hear criticism of a personal aspect of them, and not being able to recognize like, hey, I'm not saying you don't have worth or value, but like here's a better way to do that, or that's the not the correct way to do it, here's the correct way, here's the guidelines or rules. But people will take that as a personal attack, and so it makes it very difficult for them to be able to work in any environment with people because of one would say their attitude is not positive. And that has led to why a lot of the younger people I've seen have not been able to stay on jobs. They have a very hard time following rules and guidelines and receiving feedback without taking it personal and feeling like, who is this person to be able to tell me anything about myself? And then they're attacking this person, even though what they got was constructive feedback about their work ethic or the actual work that they were doing. It was objective, it was appropriate, but they took it personal, and so they started attacking people. And next thing you know, they're fighting or they're not on the job. They walked off cussing people out. I do understand also that because we don't feel like we can necessarily take care of ourselves, we will neglect ourselves in working, right? And so we'll have the amount of people who don't go to the doctor, don't go to the dentist, don't even go get their eyes checked regularly, and are working, and I will say handicapped because they're not able to perform ultimately because they have things that could be able to be addressed, but they're not addressed for various reasons. Insurance could be one of them, but taking time off to go to appointments could be another one. And so it's interfering with a person's ability to actually be in an adequate workspace. We know that disparities in pay is huge. Salary compression is real. So you're bringing newer people in for more pay, but the people that have worked there haven't gotten raises for 10 years. That lack of benefit and just inadequate livable wage is a huge portion of why people are not satisfied with their jobs or career paths, and why sometimes people feel trapped and unable to really move because I'd have to take time off the job search and go in on these interviews, and I don't have time to do that. And I say this frequently too: the devil we know is better than the devil we don't know. So we just don't feel empowered to find other things. We don't feel empowered to be able to ask for raises, or maybe I have, and in this space I'm not getting one, and so I just stopped asking. But I also that learned helplessness of not feeling like I can do anything different because maybe I've tried and haven't gotten jobs. Job searching is challenging, and it will really have you think a lot about yourself and your adequacies, because you get a lot of rejection in that job search or don't hear back, and that can be really difficult for people. I will also say too that being able to have working relationships, being able to have connection to people. Some people may not be big on the relationships, but it is very important for us to be able to have some kind of healthy support in spaces, and not having that can really also affect how you look at your occupational wellness. So, when is occupational wellness healthy? It includes honestly a lot of things. Being fulfilled in what you're doing, it giving you purpose and meaning. You having financial stability is really important, right? We talked about all the reasons why we need to be able to afford to live and have some excess, honestly, in order to be able to do some of the things we want. I think it's important for us to be able to grow. We don't like being stagnant and feeling trapped and like we're not doing anything of value or making a difference, or that we're stuck, right? So you get kind of typecast in a position, and that's all people see you as. And even though you have the capacity to do other things, nobody's giving you an opportunity. This is why sometimes people can't get promoted to management positions because people are like, no, 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 you stay here. You work really well here, and it's like I could also work really well there if I could get an opportunity to be considered in that way. Occupational wellness does include that work life balance, having connection to people or that purpose we have, that healthy thinking, that healthy mindset, being constructive. And occupational wellness is also addressing the issues that are interfering with you having occupational wellness. We talk a lot when we're addressing employees, corrective action plan, performance improvement plan, right? When you're kind of addressing some issues in areas that a person needs to grow in. But the same is true for anything. Like you can create a plan if you're not in a position where you're occupationally well, like, hey, let me kind of figure out what I need to do to address that. So, burnout, that means I need to leave work. I need to take some times off, those vacation and sick days. I need to completely unplug and not be kind of in and out of work. I need to delegate. If there's a lack of transparency or a unhealthy pattern of communication and addressing things at your work, like, hey, you have the capacity to address that work climate. Go and talk to the people who make those kind of decisions. I talk to people a lot about personality inventories to see how people would best work together. What are some of the things that maybe we haven't tried that we could try? Suggestion box. Having a strong HR. Sometimes people don't have a human resources. Being able to create one, and one that's adequately trained and it's going to be able to be objective. When we have that fear of retribution of people attacking us, sometimes we bring things up and folks make us pay for it. I've had people be fired for bringing things up, trying to institute changes. And you do always have to be prepared to have other options for job searching too. Like, hey, if something goes down, I need to be able to look. And this is when you one way to not feel trapped is to always have options. So being able to know other places you can apply for jobs, and people will tell you like, I'm on this job but I'm looking for another job, and that is because I don't ever want to feel like I settle and allow people to treat me any kind of way, and that I'm not able to speak up for myself. If there's disparities in pay, write that salary negotiation letter. Apply for positions that have more benefits. And sometimes we have to leave a company that we're working for and go outside to other companies. Work with a career coach. You may need to revamp your resume. Sometimes you need to pay to get that resume revamped. Indeed has a great service I've utilized before. You might want to work with a headhunter who is going to be looking for jobs for you based on your career and your qualifications. Sometimes we have to be the people that create the policies. You might want to get on a committee that makes those changes. Bring in a professional. You might be able to recommend some people that can come in, research other companies and what their policies are, to inform healthy change in your place of business. Now, all of this does mean that you have to have at least one healthy person in here who has some power to be able to make these things happen. But I also will say that sometimes we don't even ask, so we don't know what's possible because we've already got that self-defeated attitude. And again, that's when that positive thinking is really, really important. Sometimes we do need to change how we're looking at things, the lens by which we're looking at things. Move out of the problem to the solution focused. And again, if this isn't the space that's going to allow me to do it, then I need to be willing to look at other things. And I may need some help, right? This is when that support system may come in handy. I talk to people a lot about Goodwill and their career services center and being able to talk with people. That's where you get that career counseling. You may have mental health counseling, may help work through these barriers of how I see myself, this learned helplessness, the sabotage behaviors that I might have, some of the unhealthy patterns that I'm engaging in, that not being able to receive constructive feedback, right? Because I need to address my rejection sensitivity and I need to look at emotional regulation and I need to change patterns of distorted thinking that cause me to be critical and also to hear people talking to me as critical. Sometimes we need training. Sometimes our supervisors need training. Sometimes we need to promote other people to supervisor who are more trained. Sometimes we need shadowing. Sometimes we need to move people around. Like it's not that you're not capable, but this isn't the best fit for you. And so finding people that are in the right fit in the right place in order for their talents to be best utilized. So sometimes you'll see changes in that organizational structure can help along with that. If you have those difficulty following rules and guidelines, like that's work you got to do. Understanding like why do I have such a hard time when people tell me what to do? If I need to own my own business in order for me to be able to address that, I still am going to have to deal with people. So I am going to have to address my patterns of communication, direct communication, assertive communication versus aggressive or passive aggressive communication. So those can be things that you can work on. If I have unmanaged illness, like I need to go and see about myself. I need to take care of me. We talked about financial counseling last week, and I think sometimes we have some of that illness is around our financial patterns. And so I keep doing things to put myself in situations where I'm working in these jobs that are not conducive, but because I'm not really addressing that I'm spending too much money, I'm fighting outside my financial weight class. And so now I'm having to work these random jobs to be able to compensate for the fact that I'm overspending, right? And so being able to address all of these things, my health, I may need to be on some medication. I need to address my blood pressure. I need to be in an environment that's less stressful. Maybe I'm working in spaces where this has become too traumatic for me. Some people are working in hospice care. Like I need to move out of here. Maybe I'm working with babies. I've seen a lot of losses of children or difficult births, right? So I may need to switch some things up and figure out if there are other things that I want to do at this point in my life. And then sometimes we need to be continuing to look at the environment around us in ways of like, hey, if it's dusty, if there's mold, right? Are we able to work remotely? Can we put some work orders in and get some things addressed? We need computers. We just haven't ever wrote up the justification for why we need them and how they would benefit us and how they would save production time and cost, right? Can we lease a different space? Are we able to buy a building, especially if you're looking at creating your own business, right? Is that may be something that you can do. And also like working with different resources like hiring managers, working with colleges for students who will be fresh out of school, right? And bright ideas and resources. So trying to be creative in how we're addressing these staffing issues. So I may have to have some part-time people, some full-time people, some seasonal people, right? Like just to make this work as we're continuing to build our workforce. But also, I would tell people like sometimes you need some reasonable accommodations. You need some FMLA. You need to really talk about how an environment is affecting your health and what things you can do about it. But if you do not address what your occupational needs are, I can guarantee you they won't change. If you're unsure about what it would be like to be in a career, what would that look like for you, then being in spaces where you're learning how to do that, whether that's through that coaching or that therapy, is going to allow you, apprenticeship is going to be able to allow you to figure some things out, right? Some of us never know what our talents are, and so we don't know how talented we are. So, whatever it may be that is interfering with you being well in your job, your career, however you want to look at it in terms of your occupation, then much like I talk to you about all the time, write down the things that are making you unhappy, write down the things that you need to be happy, and then figure out that plan in order for you to get to your occupational wellness. All right, take good care of you.